I told her that I knew that we'd had this outage running, that the teams had been working on it from early hours of the morning. I know that my team had contacted her office earlier, so they also had some information. And most importantly, I assured her that we had everybody we needed on point to try and restore the network as quickly as we could. And I would keep her updated throughout the day.
Did you tell the Minister that you're aware that people weren't able to call 000?
When I spoke to the Minister at that time, we had every reason to believe that the 000 system would work as designed and that all calls would go through on alternative networks.
Was that just in relation to mobile devices?
Correct.
So you would have known at 8:30 that landlines wouldn't have been able to call 000?
It's always the case that if a landline is down, you can't call 000. That's known information.
So at 8:35 you understood that, did you understand that people were having problems calling 000 at that hour of the morning?
Chair, at that hour we did not have any knowledge of that.
So the outage is reported to have started at 4:05 a.m. What time were the relevant technicians in Optus made aware of it?
I might defer to Lambo to talk about the steps that were taken through the morning, but I believe that it was around 4:05 that there was first an alert of an issue, and our teams who monitor 24/7 were the first ones to see that. Would you like to explain?
Yes. So, Chair, the incident started at 4:05 a.m. The initial line of investigation was to understand why connectivity had been lost in terms of monitoring and management of the network. There was various incident bridges set up, one with the IT team at about 4:15. I think it's 4:15, yes, 4:15, and then there was another ticket raised on the network side by 4:37. We started up a network bridge at 4:45. There were some challenges reaching some of our team because the network was down. However, there was multiple attempts and people were reached through Teams and also WhatsApp on alternative numbers. So our team was fully engaged and dealing with the problem from about 4:37.
And what time was the first technician on site to deal with the outage?
First technician on site. I'll have to come back to you in terms of that specific timeline, but I'll just say that we had several people in the room at our NOC centre from 4:52.
Chair, it might help if I explain, because a technician on site, we're talking about lots of sites when it comes to the network.
Yes.
So we have a monitoring centre which is staffed 24/7, and then we have a duty manager who they can alert if there's an issue, and then they assemble what Lambo called as a technical bridge, which is a virtual call that all the different technicians, engineers and field technicians as required can join. That bridge also includes people from communications or representing the frontline teams. So it's not that we were waiting for any technician to arrive somewhere. It's set up so people can join from home or from the monitoring centre or wherever they're meant to be.
So there was no need to send people physically to different sites?
There was later.
Yeah, Chair, there were actually people on call in certain locations. That's our standard operating procedure. So we had technicians available. The initial response, as Kelly has said, is to understand the root, what is the incident, what is the scale of the outage, what exactly has failed, and then look at multiple lines of investigations to restore. So that was really the initial focus of the response to the incident.
Yes, but I'm trying to work out when you realised that you needed to physically send people to the centres. When did you realise that you physically needed presence on the ground?
At about 6:50, we understood what had triggered the failure across all the routers that were impacted by the outage. We had already mobilized, as I said, there was staff in several of our exchanges. That's a 24/7 operation in terms of people that we have. And then we mobilized additional engineers. We had a total of 46 people on site, restoring, responding, resetting equipment to ensure that we restored service. So from 6:52, we started mobilizing additional staff in locations where we didn't have people on site.
So at 6:50, just so that we use, language that people can understand, at 6:50 you sent people physically to these centres.
Yes.
Is that what you mean when you say mobilise?
Yes, that's what I mean, Chair, when I say mobilize. Yes.
Okay. So at 6:50 you knew that there was a problem on the ground that would need to be physically dealt with. Is that correct?
At that time, Chair, we were still investigating multiple lines of inquiry, and I can ask Lambo to go through all the different, or a number of the different lines of inquiry we were pursuing. So we had people there to try things physically. We were also trying things virtually as we were ascertaining the cause. Would you like to outline some of the hypotheses we tested?
Thanks, Kelly. So the initial line of investigation we started with was not being able to authenticate on the network. So all our staff could not reach the devices on the network remotely. We also had reports that some customers were able to access internet services by changing their what is called a domain name server. So that's a system that translates a web page into an IP address, to explain it simply. So some customers, when they changed that, they were able to access the internet. So we also looked at that as a line of investigation. We also ruled out what we call a distributed denial of service, which is a form of a cyber attack where your network gets flooded with malicious data, which is pushed through the network.
Can I just interrupt you there? So what time did you decide that you could rule out a cyber attack?
We knew it was not a distributed denial of service attack quite early, but we wanted to make sure that there wasn't ongoing traffic being fed into our network. So at about 10:20, we let Kelly and the team know that we're pretty confident it wasn't, because we had understood by then that the routers had reached this limit for another reason.
Was that a concern for you as soon as you realised that this wasn't a cyber attack, that this was a problem of Optus's making?
Yeah, well, regardless, it's a problem of Optus's making. And, but we did really want to understand if it was malicious or cyber and the ongoing threat that could pose. And there were some strange coincidences that made us quite worried about that. For example, when we had the cyber incident was the last time the Singtel board was in town, and they were in town again. So that
is a weird coincidence, isn't it?
Very strange as a coincidence. And so whilst they'd ruled out the denial of service attack as one technical type of cyber attack, there were other vectors of cyber and malicious activity and a threat intelligence that we were chasing down. And it took the team until 10:20 to be able to confirm that. But it was a very serious concern for us in those hours up until 10:20.
So I just want to go back to the beginning of your morning. You woke up, your phone wasn't working. So you knew something was going on. Many Australians did the same thing. Woke up, went to look at their phone wasn't working. But of course, you're the boss of Optus, so you knew something really wasn't working. You get in the car, you try and access data, make an internet call, voice call.
Yeah.
And that's not working. What kind of backup does Optus have to make sure when your own system goes down, you can still communicate?
We do have a process of key people having backup SIMs. And one of the learnings that we're taking from this incident is that while we have that process, the way that we allowed that to happen could have been improved. And what I mean by that is, for example, I had a backup physical SIM, which meant to activate it, I would have had to take action. Some of our people had eSIMs as their backup, and so it switched more automatically. That's clearly a better practice. And so rather than just insisting on a backup SIM, we're now going to be much more emphatic about the manner in which those backup SIMs are implemented.
So when you're in the middle of this crisis meeting, I'm just trying to envisage this. You're the second largest communications company in the country, and you couldn't communicate. But some of your people have the ability to switch SIMs. You've got a backup SIM, either an eSIM or a physical SIM. Most Australians don't have that.
That's right.
Oh, you had insurance for yourselves, but your customers didn't. Do you think that's a problem?
It is our intention to give our customers continuous connectivity and to give them a network that they can rely on 24/7, 365 days a year. We do everything we can to prevent these types of outages. We have multiple layers of redundancy, both geographical redundancy, physical redundancy, power redundancy. It is highly, highly unusual for all of the different networks which are segregated to be down at the same time.
You made some comments around the fact that you've been criticised for not speaking earlier. You mentioned that you wanted to make sure your team was okay, dealing with all of those urgent issues that you were confronted with. Did you not think that you could delegate that communication to your customers to somebody else?
Thanks, Chair, for the question. I think that's actually a very important question. Communications was delegated to the team. It's actually unusual for a CEO to appear at all during an outage because the public would expect that my focus is on working with the teams to resolve the issue. So our communications team, as per the timeline we've provided you, was giving updates to the media, fielding questions, and the team had the view at the time that this was being covered widely and all our customers knew what we knew, which is that the network was down, we were working on it, and we were very sorry. Now, I appreciate that the team did what they could with the information they had and the channels available. And yes, there's more that we could have done.
At what point did you call your legal team?
Our legal team is a standing part of our crisis team, so they were in the 7:45 meeting that was called.
So at 7:45, the lawyers were in the room?
It's one person, our Chief Legal Counsel, who's part of our crisis response team.
Was part of that legal advice for Optus not to speak too quickly?
I do not believe we got any legal advice in that meeting. That first crisis meeting was very much focused on the actions we could take to restore the network and reassure our customers during the day.
Were you given any advice throughout the day as to how to structure the apology and the concerns being raised by customers?
Chair, I'm not sure what you mean by advice, but we work together very tightly as a team in a crisis.
Were you given advice from your legal team to not admit fault?
I was not given such advice.
Were you given advice from your legal team that to be careful with what you said in case of compensation?
Chair, I was given no advice by my legal team to say or not say anything, and all the interviews I did, I was not on a script. I'm the CEO, I'm accountable. I took that accountability and I said what I believed was right.
I might go to some other questions from other colleagues, and we'll keep coming back to these questions. Senator Grogan.
Thank you. I might just continue on that line. I'm interested in how you communicated both with the government but also with your customers. And you did just say that people wouldn't expect the CEO to appear, yet you talk about leadership and supporting your customers. I note that the minister was out on radio at 7:30, broadly with no information, just providing reassurance that things were being done. Did you consider providing such reassurance earlier in the day?
Thank you, Senator. Our communication strategy is designed to empower our teams to be able to give that assurance on behalf of the company. We have a team, and any crisis management involves utilising that whole team. So whilst I personally hadn't gone out to do that, all our statements, which are in the appendix of our submission, all of them contain an apology and reassure people that we know that there's an outage and we're doing everything we can to restore that outage.
But from your full suite of staff, there was no other person that you could send out to provide assurances on a broader series of networks through the radio, TV, etc.? Because I'm concerned that you put a statement out. Obviously, that statement, your customers would not be able to access it, right?
Yes.
So the statement you provided was to everyone but your customers.
Thank you for that question.
And the media may well have been able to then reiterate that statement, but having a person from Optus go out, so I guess maybe put it to you this way. Do you have a series of protocols for such a thing, for when a disaster like this happens, where you have no comms with your customers? Do you have a protocol?
Yes, we do, Senator, and
Can you step us through it?
Thank you for the question, because I think it enables me to clarify that leveraging the media to get the message out is part of our protocol and our strategy. So issuing statements to the media from an Optus spokesperson that they can reiterate to reassure customers, that is part of our protocol and the way that we use the media to make sure that our customers know what's going on. So I thank all those media broadcasters in the morning for covering the story. That was part of what gave us reassurance that our customers were getting the message. So that's not incidental or accidental. That is actually part of our communications plan to leverage the media.
So,
Sorry, Senator Grogan, can I just jump in for a second? But what people were saying was that they weren't hearing from you. They weren't hearing from you. That is what was being reported. That is not reassuring to the community at all.
Chair, can I continue?
Yes.
So step us through exactly, or maybe you have documents that you could table for us around your process, protocol and triggers for informing the government when you have a major issue and for informing your customers when you have a major issue. And if you could maybe give us a headline walk through those and table them, that would be very helpful.
Sure, Senator. So our protocol is to inform our customers as quickly as possible.
Do you have detail? But I guess I'm interested, does your protocol step out detailed pathways for how you do this, or is it that high level, let's make sure we let people know?
No, I assure you it's not that high level. It revolves around this idea of us forming an incident management team. On that incident management team, there would be somebody allocated to customer communications. We have a media phone, which is available 24/7, and that's rotated through members of our comms team so that they're available at all times. And it is up to that incident response team that forms to make the decision of what channels to use to get the communications out. And I'd go as far as to say we have pre-approved messages that they can put out without requiring any approvals or escalations, so that they can act in as swift and timely a manner as possible. In this particular incident, because all of our customer communications was down, we understood that they weren't going to be able to log on and see a message or get an SMS. So having the media get the message out was determined to be the priority. And the person on the media phone between 4:30 and 6:33 a.m. when we issued a media statement more broadly fielded about 20 calls and was cognizant that our information was being broadcast on radio and TV.
Excuse me, that's 20 calls from the media?
I believe so.
Thank you.
And then at 6:33 they issued an official statement, and we wanted to keep updating that statement so it was fresh. So every hour and a half, we wanted to issue another update, even if we didn't have more information. And so they followed that process. In terms of notifying the government, one of the things that we've learnt through this incident is that the people who had backup SIMs and alternative communication were who we deemed to be the most essential personnel for resolving an incident, and not enough people in our government
Can I just
relations
interrupt you for a
team
moment, because
had
I have to follow that bell.
We'll come back to you when you
Yes.
get back, Senator.
That would be nice if I could have some more time. I'm finding a lot of what you're saying very, very fluffy. It would be really nice to have some more specifics, because we could spend 2 hours sitting here, not actually getting the details that we require.
Thanks, Senator Grogan. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. And I guess I'll just continue where Senator Grogan is, maybe, because as Senator Hanson-Young said, I certainly was listening to the radio that morning and heard that there was an outage, but it was overwhelmingly on 2GB, which is quite a large listened-to station in the largest state, all saying that they had absolutely no clue as to what was going on, and were making particular reference to the point that there had been no statement from yourself or from Optus that gave them any clarity. But I guess what I found having a look at your submission was one of the first things that went out was a social media post. Didn't that seem a little ironic to you, that you're letting people know there's an outage on social media when they didn't have access to it?
As I've said, Senator, our teams did the best they could with the channels that were available to them and the information. And it is frustrating when you're in an outage of that magnitude and you're unable to provide clarity. So I fully appreciate how frustrating it was for all our customers not to know what the issue was or when it would be resolved. But that's not because we were withholding communicating that. We ourselves did not know what the issue was and when it would be restored.
But isn't that the problem? I mean, you provide a service to over 10 million people, and not just individuals, government agencies, emergency services, businesses, and all they got for hours was a couple of lines that said, sorry, our service is out, we're working on it. You've got to understand, surely, that just is not good enough.
Chair, as I said in my opening statement, our performance to have an outage like this happen was not good enough. And it's highly unusual for all of these different networks that are segregated, that have multiple layers of redundancy, to all be out simultaneously.
Well, clearly there wasn't enough redundancy. There clearly wasn't enough redundancy, was there?
Can I ask my colleague to explain the layers of redundancy and what the root cause was?
Well,
would that help clarify?
Well, yes, I do want to go back to Senator Hughes, because she was in the middle of questions. Yeah. But I also want to point out that your submission in relation to what the root cause was and naming Singtel has now been disputed by Singtel themselves. So we're not sure who to believe. So it's time that someone got the story straight.
Chair, if I may respond to that. Our statement on root cause that we put out was agreed and approved with Singtel. The statement that they put out is not a contradiction, but rather a clarification. As we tried
they needed to clarify a statement that they'd already signed off on.
They were trying to clarify the way that that statement was interpreted. As you can appreciate, we're dealing with a very complex technical fault here, and what we had tried to explain was that the root cause of the issue was that our Cisco routers hit a fail-safe mechanism, which meant that each one of them independently shut down. That was triggered, the trigger event that led to that was the upgrade on the Singtel International Peering Network. We had put out the statement, which then got interpreted by various commentators as being that the root cause was the Singtel upgrade. where the trigger was the Singtel upgrade, but the root cause was the routers. So that is what has been attempted to be clarified.
For a
but I assure you they're consistent.
communications company, the communication is pretty lousy. Pretty lousy, both in the time of the crisis and in the aftermath. Senator Hughes.
Thank you. Sorry, just to come back to where we were. So how big is Optus's communications team? How many people work in your communications team?
I believe in the total team there are 7 people, but I can take that on notice and clarify.
And so that's just communications? That's not media? That's not the crisis management team?
Oh, no, sorry, that's all of media, communications, PR.
Right,
yeah,
okay. And have you
everything.
got a media spokesperson? So I'm assuming if Optus is going out to make any random announcement, it's not you all the time. Is there a spokesman or spokeswoman or spokesperson?
Yes, there's a few people in that team who can be the Optus spokespeople.
Yeah. Didn't any of them think it was a good idea? And I know you've said you didn't know anything, but sort of crisis management 101 is being seen to be on the front foot. And to even say, you know what, we don't know what is actually going on at the moment, but we are doing our best to find out. That just seemed to be a complete void. So why was, you know, and I appreciate you were, and it is a very technical issue, and obviously trying to talk to your own teams, doing things before it was you. I still think if I was your crisis communications manager, I would have had you on the phone to Ben Fordham. I would have had you on the phone to the other main radio stations so they could at least share with their networks and get grabs out there.
Might have been a better look to be out there before the minister was.
Yeah, but, you know, I mean, why did not, if someone from your team had the phone overnight and knew at 6 o'clock in the morning and was fielding these media calls, why didn't they put out some form of comment or statement that we are working through what's happening and we will be in touch during, you know, as we know more?
Senator, I really appreciate the question, and I'd love for people to have the chance to look at the appendix to our submission.
I have. I've gone through it.
What you'll see is that the spokespeople in the communications team felt that they were doing that.
Not only
did they issue the statements on social media and our statement, they were talking to many journalists and media influencers and representing exactly what you just said.
But it wasn't being
to all of
reported
those
that
stakeholders.
way. It wasn't being reported that way. People were actually saying they hadn't spoken to Optus. They hadn't heard from Optus itself.
I wish I could explain why that's the case and why people choose to report in a certain way.
Yeah.
I can only tell you that our team was on the phones talking to as many people as they could, reiterating that we were working on it and doing everything we could to restore services. And that was all the information that they had at the time, as frustrating as that was.
I just want to come to one point. I mean, the thing that I think a lot of people were upset by was, you know, obviously there was the 000 access and people's personal phones not being available, but the businesses that were impacted, their ability to take payments, to operate. We know it is a cost of living crisis at the moment. Businesses are doing it really, really tough. And yet some businesses lost fundamentally a day of trade. And, you know, if you think of some of those cafes, that their busiest periods through the morning, so you might have been up by 2 p.m, but they're done by then. You know, everyone going to buy their morning coffee, very few people have cash anymore. And I noticed there was an article in The Australian that said during a private briefing that you said, obviously it's devastating for some businesses that they weren't able to do what they normally do. Many businesses have contingency plans in place and they were still able to move forward. That's a very case-by-case scenario. Now, I mean, when I read that, my first thought was, well, you're a big company. What was your contingency plan? And obviously we're here talking about that now. I'm not a technical person. I'm happy to say I didn't even know there was a thing called an eSIM, and he'll vouch for that. But, you know, if you are committed to customers, and then this applies to all telcos, if you're committed to ensuring businesses can have a contingency plan on their communications, on their ability to participate in commerce, is this part of the process when you have account managers talking to customers that are business customers saying, you know what, things do go wrong. They've gone wrong for other networks as well. What we would suggest to you is that your business have a backup eSIM so that you can still operate? I mean, is that even crossed anyone's mind, that perhaps offering that layer of protection to business customers?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, we do have those conversations, and many of our customers do have backups, particularly larger customers who we work with to structure, and if they have other essential services, we do try and give them the levels of redundancy that they might need in a situation like this. And it's clearly something that we want to work with all of our small business customers on as well. And that's why we're encouraging all small businesses who were affected, which we're very sorry for, to reach out to us individually so that we can not only understand their specific circumstances, but also set them up so that they are more resilient in the future. Not that we're planning for anything like this to ever happen again.
And I was interested when you said, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce your surname correctly, so I might just go with Lambo as we were introduced. I apologise. But I noted you said that people were able to change their IP address or something in their phone, in their settings, so that they could then access
If you knew.
data. If you knew. Or what was that? What was that? Because these seem to me things that people might have been helpful to know. That would have been information
that
it
wasn't
would.
true.
Oh, was it? See,
Senator,
that's how.
I'll maybe just explain. It is for the average consumer, it's a very difficult thing to do and understand. So I wouldn't recommend it as a solution.
Right. Okay.
I was just explaining there was a line of investigation, and one of the first things we looked at, because we got some feedback that that's the way they got around the connectivity issue, and we thought that by restoring that service, we would be able to then reconnect all our customers.
Yeah.
But it turned out not to be the case.
Not to be the root cause.
So there was no way around the outage by changing settings.
Okay, all right, that's okay, because I thought you said that there was a way to do that.
There was just a limited amount of customers who could, if they'd done that, could have restored. Very limited.
Right, okay then. I might leave it there, Chair, and then if we come back,
We will
come back
We will
around.
come back, but we're going to go back to Senator Grogan because she got interrupted because of the vote.
Thank you. I think I might just put other questions I do have on the communications piece on notice to see if we get a tighter response. But maybe I could just take you to the processes that you may have in place for network outages. Obviously, this was comprehensive. Are your plans more tailored to a particular sort of section of the network going down?
Senator, our plans have to cater for a very wide range of possible network outages across different networks, geographies, localised, whether they're at the core or the periphery. So I believe our plans are structured in a way that really empowers the right group of people to take the steps necessary to restore, communicate to customers and escalate through the chain of command as required.
And do you have a plan in place for a full outage like you had the other day?
Well, Senator, I'll have to take that on notice. We did do a network outage exercise in October, but it wasn't for a full outage on the network.
Okay. And so do you have in place, like, do you do disaster scenario planning, and did you have a plan for if something like the extent of the outage you had on the 8th of November, did you have a plan in place for that?
We didn't have a plan in place for that specific scale of outage. I think it was, it was unexpected. We have high levels of redundancy, and it's not something that we expect to happen. It is certainly something that we commit to learning from this exercise, and from this outage, and we will take such exercises into consideration in the future.
Senator, it might be helpful if Lambo, if you can explain, for example, how much redundancy we have in each of those networks and why this was so unusual. I think that would really help everybody's understanding.
Yeah, I think that's right, because the situation we have, in your submission, you talk a lot about the inherent risk that there is for an outage in
Yeah.
your line of work, which is, fair enough. But you talk a lot about resilience
Yeah.
and hardening measures, multiple layers of redundancy, multiple layers of protection. Why did none of this work?
Yeah.
So I might start, Senator, and as Kelly has suggested, that I explain what redundancy we have in place. So we have multiple layers of redundancy in the network. If we look at how we connect the services to our customers, we have multiple what we call exchanges or sites across the country, and so we segregate different parts of the network according to that. So at any time, if one exchange is isolated, we only impact a certain amount of customers if the whole exchange is lost. The second layer of redundancy, and within that exchange, we have multiple layers of redundancy in terms of connectivity. So we would have multiple routers, at least 2 routers connecting each of the services that we connect. So, for example, if it's a fixed service for our consumer broadband customers or for the mobile voice network or mobile data, we'll have at least 2 routers providing connectivity to each of these services. And then what we do as well for mobile voice data and fixed voice is we provide geographical redundancy so that traffic can switch seamlessly across the country. So again, to another exchange where we have multiple layers of redundancy. All our intercity fibre between our major cities, we have at least 3 different routes of connectivity, and we have multiple other layers of redundancy. The specific reason why we had this major outage was, as Kelly said and we've explained, there was almost 90 routers across the country that were impacted by the single issue that we had, where a preset safety limit on these routers was reached or exceeded. And what then happened is they all shut down and effectively disconnected all these layers of redundancy and effectively created the outage that we had. And I just want to come back to the initial question around Singtel and Optus and the accountability. I just want to make it very clear that the accountability does lie with Optus. The outage was as a result of our defences for the change in routing information not working as it should have. And that's something obviously we've addressed and we've worked around the clock to ensure that we address all the issues that we found. And again, I'll ask that you indulge me and say, I just want to say thank you to my team and all the partners that we worked with to make sure that we did that in the quickest time possible.
Okay. I'm happy to move on and
Thank you.
come back to me later.
Thank you. Could I just ask a question in relation to that particular point? Obviously, routine patch upgrades, are common for Optus, common for many companies. Did you test the update before you rolled it out across the whole system?
So, Chair, maybe explain. The upgrade was done on what we call the International Peering Network, which is run by Singtel or Sticks. These upgrades are done, I wouldn't say they're done frequently or they're routine, but they are done. And our network should have been able to deal with the change.
But do you routine, when you allow these types of upgrades to happen, is there a test?
Sorry, Chair, if I may. This is an upgrade that's done by a partner,
Yes.
not by us. We get notified, but we have no ability to influence or test that. Our network has to be designed to cope with the redirection or the diversion away from where the upgrade is to an alternative link. It's actually one of those backup and redundancy options when one of those links was being upgraded and was therefore not available. What was coming through that link needed to be diverted through another link, which happened to be configured differently, and then propagated through our network in a way that triggered these fail-safes in each of the different routers.
So you don't necessarily have full control of your core routers at a time like this, is what you're saying?
No, Senator, Chair, I just want to clarify. We connect to multiple international networks. That's the way that our customers can reach all the different points on the internet, especially where they have to reach an international destination. So all of these networks work autonomously, but they connect in a standard and defined way using what we call internet protocol. And in this case, what happened, those upgrades are done by all our partners we should have in place the defense mechanisms to ensure that any change on their network does not impact our network.
But you didn't have that?
On that day, unfortunately, our defense mechanism did not work as it should have.
And
but the scale of the outage was obviously something that we didn't anticipate because of this fail-set limit that was set.
I want to ask, I've got some other questions in relation to the routers and that system, and we may need to put them on notice so we can get clear answers. But I want to come to the issue in relation to customers not being able to contact 000. We've already heard before that when the minister was spoken to at 8:30, you were unaware that Optus customers were not able to contact 000. Just want to make sure we're correct about that, because that was in evidence that was given earlier this morning.
Yes, Chair, we were not aware that any Optus customer was not able to call 000. We had full faith that the 000 system would be working at that time. I just want to make sure there was something inherent in your question where you said no Optus customers. At no time was it no Optus customers who could. The experience varied depending on which device people were calling from when we learnt of the issue later in the day.
So Optus customers were not able to access 000, and you didn't...
That's what I was trying to correct, Chair. Most Optus customers were able to access 000.
How many Optus customers weren't able to access 000?
So there were 228 000 calls that were unable to go through, and we have done welfare checks on all of those 228 calls, and thankfully everybody is okay.
And when did you do the welfare checks?
We started doing the welfare checks after our connectivity resumed.
So under the Telecommunications Emergency Services Determination ruling, you are required to do a welfare check on people who tried to call during the large network outage. So you're saying you've done that for 228 people?
I believe I can triple check the number and get back to you, but I believe it was 228.
And did you tell the emergency call services and other providers that you knew that customers were not able to get access to 000? Who did you inform?
Thank you for the question, Chair, because we absolutely believe that the 000 system should have worked, and it's critical for all Australians that that system can be relied upon. We don't manage the 000 system. It's a very complex system that involves all the carriers, it involves the device manufacturers, and it involves the 000 operators.
Why couldn't people access the 000?
We're still investigating that, and we're really happy that the ACMA have called an investigation into why this did not work.
So you don't, at this point, you still don't know why Optus customers were not able to call 000?
We've done some investigations into that, but we can't investigate that ourselves because of the complex interrelationships. And so we are really grateful that the ACMA has called an inquiry into this. We're going to work with them. We had a whole stream of work that was going on as soon as we became aware that some Optus customers weren't getting through. We were trying to solve that simultaneously to the outage. We weren't able to at the time. And we do want that investigation to happen expeditiously, and we're cooperating with that fully.
Do you think there should be a penalty because of that? I mean, it's a pretty serious breach of the emergency services protocol.
So, Chair, I think it's too early to tell where the issue actually occurred. The 000 system...
So you think it's somebody else's fault?
No, the 000 system is supposed to be able to pick up the traffic when we have an outage like this. So it is very important. It's very important, correct, and if someone else has an outage, we should be picking up some of the calls. That's how the system should work. So we
But surely it's Optus... I mean, you're not suggesting it's somebody else's fault?
We're absolutely accountable for the outage.
So shouldn't there then be a penalty on Optus for failing to provide critical service to 000?
Chair, as I've tried to explain, we don't run the 000 system. We participate in the 000 system.
But it's
and the
not anybody
system is
else's
meant-
fault that your customers couldn't call 000. Surely it's Optus's fault. So isn't it Optus that should pay the fine or cough up the penalty?
Chair, we, like you, are extremely passionate about the fact that our customers should have been able to call 000 even if our network was
So
down.
why don't you take responsibility today and say you will cop a penalty?
Chair, as I've mentioned, we really want this issue to be thoroughly investigated because multiple parties have to work together to make sure that when there's an outage, the 000 calls still go through.
Sounds like you want to share the blame around.
We absolutely take accountability for the outage. What I'm trying to explain is that the 000 system itself should have helped our customers during our outage. And we will take accountability for any role we've had in that. But there are also probably changes that need to be made in other parts of that system, potentially with different devices, because that was the determinant of whether you could or could not complete the call, the device settings, and possibly with the way that the system works. So we are committed to investigating that thoroughly, and we really do want to get to the bottom of it, not just for us, but for any time that there's an outage.
I think you
so
should
the
just,
system works.
I think this is going to wear thin. I think you're just going to have to cough up, accept responsibility, apologise and cop a penalty, surely.
Chair,
Anyway, I'm going to give the call to Senator Hughes.
I've just got one question. I might then just pass to Senator Cadell, but I just wanted to come back, Lambo, to something that you just mentioned when we were talking about having backup plans and that businesses are prepared for that. We know that there were a number of government departments that were hit, so Home Affairs, Tax Office, Workforce Australia. There were a number of government departments that lost services, and I would be very interested to talk about how Border Force was impacted. None of them appeared to have a backup plan because they weren't up and running. They didn't go to an eSIM or whatever they could have gone to as a contingency. How does that work? Why is the government not they haven't in place a backup contingency plan should some pretty significant departments experience this kind of outage?
Senator, if you don't mind, I'd like to take that question on notice because for each customer that we deal with, we offer bespoke solutions that are designed for their needs, and some of our corporate networks were actually up and running and were not affected by this outage. And so I do not have information at hand for each specific customer as to what was and wasn't working and what their backup plans were. Was
there any communication between Optus and the Minister for Home Affairs or her office, because she's responsible for Border Force? They have a pretty important role to play in keeping Australians safe, yet they did not have coverage on that Wednesday. And I'm particularly interested if there was any communication between Optus and the Department of Home Affairs or the Minister's office.
Yes, Senator, I can confidently say that there was communication with her office. Our account managers were in communication with all of our customers that day, our corporate and government customers, to make sure they were being kept abreast of everything that we knew. I also personally reached out to Minister O'Neill, and our government affairs team was in contact with her office too.
Okay. I might pass to Senator Cadell because I know he's got some questions and he can use that block.
You just mentioned in that some of the corporate setup. My understanding of the network, you have Evolve Internet being the corporate base, and then you have the cellular network and the consumer mobile all linked to the network core. Is that the correct structure for what you've got?
So, Senator, the Evolve, as you referred to, is the enterprise or business network, and that's a separate network to the one that was impacted on Wednesday.
But it operates on the same network core?
No, they operate on two different sets of network cores. They're interconnected.
They are interconnected.
Yes.
Okay, now you talk about these parties, these third parties and partners. We've mentioned Singtel. We're using Cisco, great brand, we're saying they're the routers that failed. Can you tell me what Akamai, what role does that play in the Singtel network or the call? What do they do?
Akamai is one of the largest, what we call a content delivery network.
Yes.
So what they do is they aggregate content from multiple sources, and they deliver it into our network, and they're one of the largest content delivery networks globally. So they peer into our local network.
Okay, and what is the role of Nokia?
Nokia provides multiple services for us. So they are equipment provider on our radio network and also our IP and transport network. They also provide us with managed services for our network.
Okay, did Nokia have any role in the software upgrade as part of the Singtel spine?
No, Nokia was not involved. As far as I know, Nokia was not involved, and I don't expect that they were involved.
Okay, was the problem around a prefix filter that meant that your Cisco routers overloaded?
The defense on our connectivity to the STIX network, yes, there was an issue with the prefix filter.
So the prefix filter was what overloaded the 90 Cisco routers, that it was grabbing data from all the world and grabbing traffic from...
There was a filter that, as I said, the defense mechanism that we should have had in place was exactly that, the filter that we should have had in place. But again, that even if that failed, we didn't expect such a large-scale outage because, for us to lose 90 routers in one outage is not something that we contemplated.
I understand that, but over the prefix filter. So what role did Nokia play in trying to get these going? Did Nokia play any role in trying to get these going from a remote perspective?
Yes, Nokia is our managed services partner for our network, and they were involved from the very beginning in managing and running the incident and recovering the network.
Where were their staff based?
Their staff are based in India in 2 locations.
Right. So when we first got on date, and you went through with Senator Hanson the timetable of when we were showing up, isn't it true that the first person on board, even you couldn't access these things remotely because they were offline? There was none of these routers were able to be physically rebooted unless you are sitting at plugged in, physically connected to it.
That is correct, yes.
When you say that was correct in this outage. We do have a system that should enable remote.
But it did not.
That was down as well.
That's what we're saying. So we're relying on overseas people in India to do system. Your system relied on an Indian firm to outsource this problem to fix these things remotely when we couldn't do it across your entire network.
But Senator, if I could explain, even if we had engineers in Australia, we would have had the same issue and the same challenges.
Okay.
For us to reset, and maybe I can give you some context. We had 90 devices across 14 locations that were impacted. We had to reboot, in addition to some of those 90, about half of the 90, we had to reboot another 50 other network elements to restore connectivity.
I understand that.
So there was a total of 100 devices across 14 locations that we had to reboot and restore connectivity to.
When you saw the first ticket was issued at, I think, 420 something, I think, or 405, you said, when a physical person showed up, is it true that they didn't have the right console table to connect and reboot and see if that was a problem at 9 o'clock in the morning?
Sorry, Senator, you referred to console table?
A console table to connect to the Cisco routers. One of your people showed up at one of your locations to test if that was a problem and didn't have the right equipment to be able to connect to it.
They had some issues in terms of connecting to the console, but that was because there was various issues in terms of connectivity into the Cisco routers.
Right, so when Telstra had an outage in May 8 over a software upgrade that caused unexpected perils, did you game that with your own system? See what could happen to you if you were exposed after Telstra's problem in early May?
We understood, we asked our partners who provide equipment to Telstra what happened, and they were obviously not willing to share details, but we have investigated that and put in place measures to ensure that we didn't have the same issue.
Okay. You said you had plans earlier for disaster recovery and also not on this scale, but have you ever gamed them, or do you just rely on them being written and hope they'll work?
As I said, in October, we ran a scenario where we lost one of the states, WA, and also in the same scenario, we did an assessment of a potential attack on one of our exchanges in South Australia.
How many senior network engineers does Optus employ?
How many sorry, Chair, I'll have to take that on notice. We have a team of 1,000 staff, and on that day...
Not asking that question. Network engineers, CIOs, that sort of level, the technical side.
Well, I head up the network team, and I have a team of about 12 reporting to me.
So literally,
But we'll take it on notice
Yep.
because we do have a lot of engineers on staff, and we'll get back to you.
So seeing an external threat, a software upgrade, do we still use any Huawei devices in the network?
We still do use Huawei equipment in the network.
Is that what's used as termination
Sorry.
devices to connect to the fibre?
The Huawei devices are used on the periphery. They're not used in the core.
Are they
so
not?
they were not involved in this
I'm
incident.
not asking that question. Are they network termination units to connect to the fibre?
In certain locations, they are being used, but as I said, we are replacing them progressively across the network.
When was your network architecture last reviewed?
Our network architecture is reviewed on a consistent basis.
When was the last major review?
I'll have to come back to you on that one, but as I said, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Senator, I can tell you that in addition to reviewing it regularly ourselves, we also, from time to time, have third-party experts review and help us assess whether our resilience is as strong as it should be and whether the steps we're taking are adequate.
When was the
And
last
I am
time
aware
that happened?
I'm aware that 18 months or 2 years ago, we had Bell Labs assist us with ensuring that our network architecture and resilience was as strong as it could be.
And we, Senator, we do regular testing of our failover. So we do that when we do software upgrades or we isolate nodes to do work on them. And we identified an over 42 tests that we do on a regular basis to test the resilience and redundancy of the network.
Are Singtel as an owner overly demanding on dividends or capital returns to them?
I think Singtel is a fantastic shareholder. They've invested more than $42 billion in the networks in Australia for very low returns.
Okay, what's a criticism from others in the industry are that Optus has taken to making an art form, outsourcing what should be core competencies, that there are low technical telco experience in your CIO, not a lot of telco experience. So what confidence can we have that, we're using Cisco systems, we're using external sources, we've got a Singtel router. What systems do we have security and control of your network in any way, shape or form?
Senator, I really appreciate the question because I think it's very important to say that we do outsource a number of components of our network management to global leading companies. And it is something that I do think we should look at as whether we have the right level of outsourcing and insourcing. And it is something that has been on the minds of the team that we've already been thinking about. So that is something we will look at further. I can tell you that our networks team is highly experienced. There are a number of engineers who've been network engineers for many, many years. They're a very hard-working team. They are absolutely devastated about what happened, and they go above and beyond to try and keep the network operating all the time. So we do have a lot of experienced people. We take our responsibility to keep the network up and running incredibly seriously. It's in everybody's interests, our customers, our own, our shareholders, the communities, and we do everything we can to avoid a situation like this. And we're very apologetic that it happened, but I don't think it should cause people to doubt just how much effort, attention, resourcing and financial commitment we have to resilience.
As the CEO, are you not aware of low morale of the tech team because they feel that it was dumbing down of the internal abilities of the company in the IT sector, in the network sector? Do you think that there was a general panic or disillusionment that when this happened that they weren't able to respond to it on the ground?
I can maybe Kelly talk this.
Go for it.
Well, just to be clear, Senator Cadell did ask the CEO the question about staff morale. I think it's important for her to answer that question.
Yep, I'm very happy to answer that question because we don't just wonder about staff morale, but we also do staff engagement surveys. And we actually got our results of the most recent staff engagement survey about 3 weeks ago. And the engagement of our teams was the highest it's ever been for Optus at 77%. And Lambo, what was it in networks?
My team's engagement score was 80%. It was the third highest in the organisation. Yes.
So we do believe that the morale of the teams is strong and improving.
When you talk about the openness and the willingness to go forward, will you commit to releasing the Deloitte report in the cyber attack, or will you be appealing the court's decision on that?
Thank you for the question. As you can appreciate, the Deloitte report contains a forensic investigation into our cyber defences and is highly sensitive in its material. We are conscious that that attack is still the subject of an ongoing federal criminal investigation, and that the contents could be so sensitive that they expose us to national security concerns. So the team will be looking at whether they appeal that decision.
Thank you. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mrs Rosmarin and Mr Kanagaratnam, for being here today. First question I have has to do with your stakeholders. You've got stakeholders in terms of your employees, your shareholders, your customers, the government. Anyone else? Your service providers?
Yes, and the community at large.
Community. And you've got a responsibility for communication. And what I see is that your main priority was identifying the cause and being a leader for your people. Is that correct?
My main priority was...
Early in the incident.
My immediate priority early on in the incident was to make sure that all the resources of Optus were adequately focused on the jobs they needed to do to restore services as quickly as possible, take care of customers, and keep everybody apprised of as much information as we had.
Right, and so you delegated the responsibility for initial communications prior to finding out what the cause was and how long you'd be out to your media people.
That is correct.
And you got it out, communications to the media at 6:33.
Yes,
Correct?
that's correct.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
That was the official statement where we proactively sent it out to media, yes.
So you're focused on root causes, focused on leadership of your team, and left the media to someone else because that was the right priority.
At that point in the morning, that is what we felt was best for the team, yes.
Thank you. That's what appeared to me to be the case. Secondly, what responsibilities does Optus have to the Minister and to ACMA?
We obviously have a responsibility to work together with the Minister, with our regulators, to make sure that the Australian public has great connectivity, that we fully comply with all the expectations of the public, and that we have a strong competitive sector where our customers benefit from choice, innovation and a range of services.
So once you identify the causes of this outage and you do a review of your response, will that be given to the Minister, communicated to her?
The Communications Minister has already announced that they'll be doing a full and thorough review into the incident, and we are intending to fully cooperate with that and give them all the information that they request.
Okay. Being so few providers in the telco space, I imagine that you'll work fairly closely with ACMA and the Minister. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, I'm also very concerned about the levels of government intrusion across our country. And I'm not talking about the Albanese Labor government specifically. I'm talking about governance in this country seems to intrude a lot. Did government or governance affect you at all? Did the national governance affect you at all in terms of the cause, the recovery, the future? Do you have any concerns about the intrusion of government?
Senator, on the contrary, I thought our conversations with government were very important. Government was there to help and support. As was mentioned earlier, Minister Rowland was on TV early speaking to customers. Those were all very helpful. And there was no area where I could say that I felt that we were in any way impeded from doing the right thing and getting on with the job.
Thank you. Speaking outside of this outage, is there any legislation that is needed for you to do a better job, or any legislation that is currently impeding you and needs to be removed?
Senator, if you wouldn't mind, I would like to take that on notice and chat to my broader team before responding.
Thank you. You mentioned, Mr. Kanagaratnam, the attacks. I think it was you who mentioned it. How often do you get cyber attacks? And what size?
Chair, sorry. The cyber attacks are ongoing threat and challenge, and we have to continuously defend against them. I don't have specific information in terms of the number that we have, but it's an ongoing threat and issue that we have to deal with and defend against all the time.
Senator, our cyber security actually reports into our Chief Information Officer, Mark Potter, not into Lambo, but I know we have millions of cyber attacks every year that we defend against.
So thousands a day?
I could get back to you with the exact
please.
Numbers.
Okay. Also interested in, you mentioned, Mr. Kanagaratnam, the service that Nokia provides from India. I'm also just recently been made aware of apparently a fact that communication through the internet from the east coast of Australia to Western Australia is via China or via the United States, and same with the communication from Western Australia back to the east coast is via those two countries, with the predominance being through China. Is that correct?
No, Chair. Senator, that's not correct. We have both terrestrial, as in fibre that traverses the land, and also submarine cable connectivity, which we own and operate on our own to connect the east coast and west coast of Australia.
So they're connected entirely on our continent?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
And to answer your question in terms of Nokia being offshore, they have a combination of resources offshore and also locally, and we supplement that with our own team. So 100% of our engineering, network deployment to rollout, and field teams are in-house or run by our team, and about 25% of our operations insurance team is also onshore and run by Optus.
Are there any services that rely on overseas, apart from your service in Nokia, are there any connections that require overseas routes?
There would be to our offshore call centres, to some of the IT support teams as well globally. This is practice that most companies, not just telcos, run in terms of how they run their operations.
Are there any market power or market pressure concerns that you have, Ms. Rosmarin? And do they impact on your company?
Thanks, Senator. So clearly we're a small industry with a dominant incumbent provider and only two other providers who are much smaller. So there definitely are some conversations that we have on a continuous basis to make sure that the market is competitive, dynamic and fair.
So so you have conversations with the Minister?
We do have conversations with the Minister.
On that topic?
Yes.
Thank you. Coming to compensation to customers who lost money, I understand you've offered customers $100 data, but it must be used by the 30th of December. Is that really going to be significant to them?
Thanks for asking for clarification on that, Senator. For our postpaid customers, we've given them 200 gigabits of data to use over the holiday period. I believe that's for a few months, but they have to have activated it by December, but depending when they activate it, they will get it for a couple of months. The idea being that they have access to that data over the holiday season when people do tend to use and consume more data. For our prepaid customers, what we've done is give them unlimited data on weekends through to the end of the year. And for our fixed customers, we've given them a free speed upgrade on their NBN to the end of the year. And then we've invited anyone who has unique circumstances and wants us to look into those individually to contact us.
Thank you. What about compensation for people who couldn't settle, for example, a house purchase? Because I understand a lot of settlement is done electronically now, and a lot of services in general are done electronically.
Yeah, so on the issue of consequential losses, Senator, we felt that this was an issue that's much more broad and that should government choose to look into this, we'd love to be part of that conversation. But there is no precedent for telcos or other essential providers covering consequential loss. And we are very conscious that this would have far-reaching implications, not just for Optus, but not just for all telcos, including the NBN, also for other essential services, utilities, government services, and that this needs to be a much broader conversation than us unilaterally determining how to go about that.
Sharing the blame around. Senator Roberts, I might go to Senator Pocock if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your time here this morning. I'm interested to learn about the financial impact on small businesses and whether you've modelled the impact that this had on small businesses across the country.
Senator, as you'd appreciate, every small business is different. The impacts are different on all of those operations. Some were able to take different actions, and so it is not a task that we would be able to do.
What have you tried to do to gauge the lost income or the impact this had on small businesses?
At the moment, what we've done is ask for each of those businesses who have concerns to reach out to us, and then we'll speak to them, understand what has occurred, and also make sure that we can help them be set up in the future.
How do you contact those small businesses to do
Some
that?
of our customers have account managers, and we also have a dedicated business line.
Okay. How many small businesses have contacted Optus seeking compensation for income loss during the outage?
I actually do have that, but it's on my phone. If you can give me a second to look.
Let's hope it's working.
I'm confident that it is working.
Seems a bit slow.
Yeah, no, chin up
I think
through the
that's
door.
me. We do have the fastest 5G. So far we've had...
When it's up.
Which is most of the time. We've had 8,500 customers and small businesses reach out. So far, they've been discussing with us around $430,000 in compensation, and we've already applied $36,000.
So 430,000 across the board cumulatively, and you've paid out 30,000?
So far, I don't have any details into how, the veracity of those claims and what's happening.
Sure.
That's the information that I have.
What's the process to verify the veracity of claims and then pay out the remaining $430,000?
Well, I don't want to make any commitments on how much we're going to pay, Senator. What I am committed to, and what our teams are committed to, is to have a process to individually engage with each customer on their unique circumstances, to evaluate what's the right thing to do for that customer, and to work with those customers to help ensure that they're set up well into the future.
Have you established a dedicated small business team or call centre to be able to deal with this, or are they just going through the usual avenues?
We have a dedicated business centre for our customers to call into, and so that is the team who is managing this as well.
And how many? Do you know how many small businesses were impacted by the outage in terms of payments?
I'll take that on notice and get back to you, because some of the payments were working, actually. It's only about 50%, as I understand, of payment terminals that weren't working or didn't have the right backup.
So that, just maybe I can add, if the payment terminals were only reliant on the Optus mobile network, they would have been down. But otherwise, if they had the ability to have either alternative connectivity or to switch to another mobile provider, then I think they would have remained operational.
Okay, maybe just
from what I understand.
Notice the number. And then I'm just interested in terms of these sort of outages, if you have any insurance or how it works, like what do you see your liability as a company when companies, like small businesses, are relying on you to be able to do business and they're compromised?
Senator, that liability is the same as any provider of essential services, utilities, government services. Our contracts are designed in a way that we are clear that we're providing our coverage on a best endeavours basis, and we recognise that outages can occur. We work very hard to make sure that they don't, but they are provided on a best endeavours basis.
Okay. And on that, if Best Endeavours is in the contract, why have you paid out compensation to small businesses then?
I mean, I don't like to use the word compensation because what we're doing is assessing the specific scenario of that customer and trying to do the right thing by that customer who we want to have a long-term relationship with us.
Okay, and just finally, just to confirm that you have paid out cash and not just sort of in-kind services.
I can double check that for you.
I think that's an important point to clarify because you've given us the figure of $36,000 paid so far. We do need to know whether that is in services or cash terms.
Sure.
Do you have any? Do you have any sense that that's a combination of the two?
I don't have any information right now, but I'm happy to take that on notice.
Thank you. Yes, and Senator Grogan has a follow-up to that.
With the conversations you're having with small business, if the offer you make to them is not acceptable to them, what recourse do they have?
Our customers have recourse to the telco industry ombudsman, and we have had a meeting with the ombudsman, and we will work closely with them to make sure we have a process to deal with that in a timely and efficient manner with them.
Have you had any that have been unhappy with the offer so far?
I don't know.
Okay.
And thanks, Senator Grogan. And just to clarify, you've said there's been claims of up to $430,000 so far, claims for compensation or complaints, requests for compensation. I just want to clarify that figure.
Yes, that's what I've been given by my team, and whether they're discussions, claims, complaints, I can't be more specific, I'm afraid.
But you don't like the word compensation?
Chair, the only reason is because I do think that there's an important conversation to be had across government and industry about contingent loss because of the far-reaching implications that will have for all essential service providers, for all telcos, for all utilities, for all government services. And I think that conversation is important because it will impact all of those organisations and the cost of those services moving forward. And so we would really welcome being a part of that conversation, but we don't see it as our place to unilaterally lead that.
I just want to go, I'm going to go to Senator Cadell, but I just have one follow-up to a question I was asking earlier, and that was in relation to your own and your team's backup SIMs. Who's the provider for your backup SIMs?
Well, I now have all three. I used to have Vodafone, but I have Telstra now too.
I have a backup SIM from Vodafone.
Okay.
And I think it's varied. What we do vary it. We don't specify across the company for obvious
so if
reasons.
Optus goes down, you get to use Telstra or Vodafone?
Yeah, but you've got to pay for it.
But you,
Yes.
Yes. It'd be good if the public could just easily swap, couldn't it?
Domestic roaming.
As Senator Cadell.
Kelly, you earlier stated that you had Bell Networks do a review of architecture 18 to 2 years ago. We've heard from Lambo that Nokia are a big part, massive contractor in your network. Who owns Bell Networks?
But I can answer that, Kelly.
Yeah.
So Bell Labs are part of Nokia globally.
Yeah, correct. So they're marking their own homework. You're getting Bell Labs to mark their own network infrastructure, their own services to you.
So I can clarify, Nokia is one of our providers.
But a significant one, you said what they do, and they do
They
the
are
outsourcing.
one of our providers, and so are Ericsson, and so are Cisco,
I understand
and so
all
are
that.
several others. So, and they are a very proficient and experienced and professional provider of this service. They weren't
able to help on this.
Sorry?
They couldn't fix this, could they?
Senator, the fundamental premise of what you're saying is correct. That even though we've done very detailed reviews into our architecture, our processes, our risks to make sure we could be as resilient as possible, We did not have an articulated, clear risk that each one of our 90 routers would independently shut itself down at the same time using a fail-safe on those Cisco routers that our team was not aware of. So that specific risk that caused this outage was not identified in any of our reviews.
Thank you, Chair.
Senator Henderson, have you got some questions?
I have. Thank you very much, Chair. Ms Bayer-Rosemarin, this morning there's been a media report that you intend to resign as CEO. Is it your intention to resign?
Senator, I'm sure you can appreciate my entire focus has been on restoring the outage issue.
Could I just ask you to answer that question?
And it has not been a time to be thinking about myself.
Could you address that question? Are you intending to resign?
I thought I answered the question. My focus is on the team, the customers, the community. My focus is not on myself.
So that report is not correct?
I haven't seen any reports today. I've been preparing for being here.
Sorry, Senator Henderson, do you want to ask another question?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Yep.
Yes. Ms Bayer-Rosemarin, can I ask you to explain a bit more about the peer network, the issues with Singapore Internet Exchange? You've explained the network was overwhelmed by updates from a peer network, Singapore Internet Exchange. The affected Optus autonomous system has been reported in the media as peering not only with Singtel but also Akami, Flag Telecom and China Telecom's ChinaNet. Could one of those other peer networks, such as ChinaNet, automatically update and perhaps adversely affect the Optus network as Singtel's network has done?
Do you want to?
So one of the after the outage and one of the recovery steps we did was to understand, and forensically work with our partners to understand what the trigger and the root causes were, and we have applied the necessary protection to ensure that none of our peering partners could create a situation where a repeat of the outage could happen again.
And why are you certain that that's the case?
Because we have applied the necessary protection, we have worked with our partners to verify, validate, and we have worked through a series of workshops. Our team has worked around the clock to make sure that all of all the different scenarios and requirements had been worked through and put in place.
Ms Kelly Bayer-Rosemarin, the outage was caused by the actions of an overseas-based network, as we know. You've referred to, in general terms, with some communications with the Minister for Home Affairs. Can you detail those communications? Has the Minister for Home Affairs been in touch to understand exactly how this occurred? And prior to the outage occurring, had the government taken any steps to seek to ensure that Optus was not vulnerable to an international provider bringing down the network?
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Senator. So firstly, just to be completely clear, we are accountable at Optus for the network that we operate. Lambo has full autonomy in making decisions about how that network operates, and I'm accountable as the CEO of the company. So whilst the trigger event happened in an international peering network, which all telecommunications companies peer with other networks, it was our responsibility to make sure that nothing that happens in one of those peering networks has an impact like this.
Could I just ask you to address the question, though? The question is, had the government taken any steps to seek to ensure that Optus was not vulnerable to an international provider bringing down the network?
So we work very closely with the government and our regulators whenever we're introducing network elements or other working with others to make sure that the government is comfortable with who we're dealing with and how we're dealing with them.
Early last Wednesday, did you try to call the Minister for Communications, or did the Minister try to call you, and what time was that?
I called the Minister for Communications at 8:32 a.m, although my team had been in touch with her office prior to that.
What time had your team been in touch?
I believe it was just before 8.
And who from your team?
I believe that was Andrew Sheridan, but I'll take it on notice to confirm that that's who it was.
And what was the nature of your discussions with the Minister?
We had a reasonably brief conversation. It was very constructive. I explained what we knew at the time, which was unfortunately not much, and expressed our commitment to resolving the issue. The Minister offered her full support as needed, and we agreed that I would keep her updated during the day.
So the Minister went on radio, I think at 7:30, and gave assurances. On what basis did she do that, given that no communication with Optus had occurred at that time?
At that time, there was communication from Optus Senator that confirmed that we knew about the problem and we were working on it.
But you just said
So
the
she
first
was-
communication was just before 8 o'clock with Andrew Sheridan.
Sorry, that was a direct communication between our offices, but the communication, more generally, the statement that we'd issued that we were working on it was out there. So I believe
so the
she
statement-
was fully justified to say that.
So the Minister was relying only on the statement, the public statement issued by Optus.
I think that would be a question for the Minister.
Did the Minister explain what action, if any, the government was taking to help bring this crisis to an end?
I believe that she just offered her full support for us to focus on the issue.
Did the Minister ask you about what government services or facilities were impacted by the Optus outage?
Yes, she did.
And what was your response?
I explained that all of our mobile data, voice and fixed networks were down, but not all of our corporate networks, and that's the information that I had at the time.
And to what extent were government services impacted, given your corporate networks were not impacted?
It varied on a customer-by-customer basis.
If you could provide the details of the government services impacted on notice, I'd be most grateful. Did Minister Rowland ask for assistance in helping to deal with outages of government services to the extent that they were impacted?
She did not ask that of me, no.
Did she ask anyone else for assistance?
I don't know.
Could you investigate that and take that on notice and come back to the committee?
Sure.
Did Minister Rowland say to you whether the government had any contingency plans in place to deal with the loss of essential services, such as the 000 service?
Senator, I think obviously we have a lot of communications with government, and it's probably not appropriate for us to keep going through what those communications were.
It's very appropriate, because I'm asking you a specific question. Did Minister Rowland say to you whether the government had any contingency plans in place to assist with the loss of access to essential services? It's really important you answer that question.
I don't recall that.
Thank you. Did the Minister advise whether she was talking with any other telcos, trying to arrange for other telcos to step in and provide services on an urgent basis?
No, that was not mentioned. But Senator, that was something we also discussed in our first crisis meeting, whether there's even the ability to have customers go on another network on scale like that, and it's not a capability that exists.
So what did the government do to actually help restore services, if anything?
Keeping the Optus network up and running is Optus's full accountability.
Are you aware of any substantive action taken by the Minister for Communications with respect to how the government assisted Optus with the outage or to solve the outage?
The government did announce an immediate inquiry into what had happened, and that inquiry is broad and will cover other telecommunications networks as well, and we think that's very constructive and helpful and intend to cooperate with that fully.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair. No further questions.
Thank you. All of us, I imagine, at this table and our parliamentary colleagues have been inundated with members of the public who have been impacted by this. Over 10 million customers. We've covered the serious elements of people not being able to access 000, and that is very serious. We know that there is individuals who have lost income because they weren't able to do their job throughout the day. or have their own customers pay for services. I've had members of the public reach out and say that they weren't able to be in communication with family in the middle of brain cancer surgery, that people weren't able to access childcare services because childcare centres wouldn't take people's children if there was no way of contacting them. Trains went out. School, my own daughter's school wasn't able to be contacted via the telephone because they use the Optus network. And do you really think that $1.60 is enough compensation
Chair,
for all of this?
We completely agree with you. We understand how essential our services are to our customers, and we are very sorry for the outage, and we know that there is nothing we can do or say that gives people back the time that they lost and some of the things that occurred on that day. And that's why we tried to do something meaningful for our customers. We agree with you that just refunding people for the day between $1 and $2 was not going to cut it, and that's why we went further to offer those data offers to our customers.
Have you been surprised at the frustration that your customers have expressed at that data offer? And I haven't heard anyone who said, "Oh, great, thanks, Optus."
So, Chair, we have a lot of customers, and I have heard a wide range of responses. There are customers who have written to me to say, thank you for the extra data. So there are a wide range of responses, but we do completely understand the frustration, and it's in everybody's interest that we keep the networks up and running, and we are doing what we can to show our customers that we care, that we apologise, that we appreciate their patience and their loyalty. The thing they want most from us is for this to not happen again and for us to keep the networks up and running.
And what guarantees will you give today that this won't happen again? What have you done to make sure it won't happen again?
I'm going to hand to my colleague Lambo to talk about the steps that we've taken. What I can guarantee you is that we will do everything we possibly can to try and prevent another incident like this from occurring, and that we've taken steps to make sure this same specific could not occur. Do you want to outline the steps, Lambo?
Yeah, so since the outage on Wednesday morning, we've been working forensically around the clock with our partners to firstly understand what the root cause was, what the trigger was, and how we could increase the resiliency of the network to the outage. We've implemented 4 key changes on the network. So the first one we've done is make some changes on our international gateway routers that connect to our peering partners to ensure that the routes don't propagate the same way they did on that morning. The second change we've made is increase the connectivity and the resilience between our enterprise and business network and the consumer network that went down on that morning. We've also improved the availability of what we call the management network, which is redundant, but we've increased the protection on that so it doesn't get impacted the same way it did when the outage occurs. And then finally, we implemented a network-wide change freeze to ensure that we don't have any other impact on the network during this period so that we have stability.
And what about an overhaul of your PR team and your crisis response management? Because that is one of the biggest problems that members of the public have raised with us, and what all of us at this table have put to you today, that the communication with Australians in the midst of this was appalling. What have you done to fix that?
Thanks for the question, Chair. There are always opportunities for us to do better. As I said in my opening, I wholeheartedly believe that the team did the best that they could with the information they had at the time and the channels available. Having said that, there have been suggestions to us that we do press conferences versus one-on-one interviews, that our messages are of a different tone, etc. And we will be taking all of that feedback on board to try and make sure that we do better in the future. whilst at the same time trying to make sure there is no future where that's needed.
Senator Grogan.
I just want to follow through on that line. What it's sounding like for us, I think I'm probably speaking for all of us, is that you're not hearing what we're saying.
No.
My understanding, my experience, and I know that of some of my colleagues, is, you know, if you work for a large business, there's a lot of crisis planning, there's a lot of risk management work. Now, on a risk management matrix, this scenario, this situation that occurred on the 8th of November would sit down there as like highly unlikely but catastrophic, right? You would understand risk matrix.
Yes, absolutely.
So that would lead you, surely, as an organisation of your size, to have a plan for something catastrophic that would include a significant public relations piece, because you have to assure your customers who are concerned, confused and not knowing what's going on, that they see a face or they hear a voice and this is actually the company telling us what's going on, or telling us they don't know but they're finding out.
Showing some compassion and empathy.
So, but I haven't heard anything that you've kind of taken that piece and gone, well, yes, one of the things we're looking at is, because there's been plenty of commentary since the 8th around your public relations approach to this, but there's nothing in what you're telling us about how you're looking at improving the learnings you're taking from this, how you're going to improve into the future, how you're going to provide more assurity for your customers. Not hearing anything about that.
Yeah,
about the comms and also risk management.
I apologise, Senator, because I have been trying to say that we're taking on board learnings about how we did that. We did follow the plans we had in place. I think one of the things you said really resonated with me. You said that maybe people now want a face and a voice, and a statement and our teams talking in the background via the media was less ideal than if we'd had a real face and a voice, which I try to bring from 10:30 to this. So I think that's a great suggestion, and we will of course take that on board. I do want to just make sure that people understand that there was no intention from Optus not to be communicating. We felt our messages were out there for the customers, and that customers did know there was an outage. They did know we were working on it. And as frustrated as everybody is that we didn't have more information to give, which is what people really wanted, what was the problem and when would it be fixed, I can't tell you how frustrating that was on our side as well. We wish we had something more to communicate in those early hours. So we are absolutely open to taking all the learnings and suggestions, and I appreciate your constructive suggestions, which will feed into our learnings moving forward.
So this does take you back to the management of risk, because obviously at your company, there's a lot of customers who would be weighing up what they do next. That always happens. That surely is part of your risk management piece in terms of, you know, from a hard sort of business end, not losing customers, right? And that all the way down to the kind of services you provide to government, to train networks, hospitals, etc., etc. Your risk management framework, your risk management plans and approach is probably the piece that I'm most concerned about in terms of how are you gaming this, how are you brainstorming this, how are you sort of plotting out, how do we make sure that we are the most robust we can be in the face of an incident occurring that we have not predicted?
Thank you so much for that question, because we do have a very robust risk management framework, and that framework does allow us to look at different scenarios, their impacts, and how we plan to avoid those. And that is quite extensive across a range of risks, as you would imagine, and something that we practice and evaluate regularly. So,
when you say regularly, how regularly? I know when I was asking earlier, you said that you'd had one trial on part of the network earlier in the year. So what's the sort of frequency?
Each area does their own testing frequently. or at their own frequency, and as a company we update that risk process at least annually. And we have an executive risk committee that meets at least quarterly to go through everything that we need to do and all risks that are arising. So we have a very robust process there. But I also want to go to the heart of your question, which is that we also have a very real lived experience as a company because of the cyber attack as to the implications when an unexpected risk occurs. And the team has worked incredibly hard to regain trust from our customers since that. In the last 14 months, we've put ourselves back in a position of gaining market share in our core mobile product line. We have lifted our customer satisfaction back to the levels before that occurred. We have actually achieved our lowest telco industry ombudsman complaints ever in the company's history last month. So we, as a company, completely understand the implications that come from one of those risks eventuating, and we've put in the hard work to recover from that once before. So there is nobody in the company who would have wanted something like this to happen again, not just because we have risk management processes and strategies to go through, but because we have a lived experience of it as well.
Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to ask you about Minister O'Neill. Did Minister O'Neill or anyone from her office contact you or anyone in Optus regarding fears that this could have been a cyber attack or a cyber threat?
I contacted the Minister during the morning and made sure she knew our teams were in contact. So her office and ours were in contact during the day.
And what time was that?
I'll have to check the exact time. I believe it was around 9:30 that I personally spoke to her, but again, we can get back to you on exactly what time our office was in contact.
Were you able to advise the nature of the outage at that point in time?
No. As I've mentioned, Senator, it took us until after the network was restored to be able to describe the cause of the outage.
I know, I appreciate that, but in terms of ruling out a cyber attack,
yes.
What advice did you give the Minister?
We only were able to rule out a cyber attack at 10:20, and at that point, about 15 minutes later, I went on the radio and made that announcement publicly, and so we were able to communicate that to everybody after that time.
And did the Minister for Home Affairs provide assistance or in any way up until the point of time when a cyber attack was ruled out?
As I mentioned, we were in contact with the Australian Cyber Security Centre, who we work with closely and regularly, and they were providing us with assistance, yes.
And, sorry, just to go back to my question, did the Minister make any offer of assistance?
I don't think specifically, but I'm sure she would have been aware that we would be working with the appropriate teams on that.
Can I ask you about whether you've received any notice of any legal claims, or are there any proceedings which have been instituted?
Not to my knowledge.
Any threats of legal claims?
Not to my knowledge.
Can I ask you about the cost?
Could you take those
yes,
on notice?
Yes, I could take those on notice and
you.
ask our legal team. Yeah.
Could I ask you about your PR and strategy advice you've received in relation to managing the fallout of the outage? What has been the cost of that PR and strategy advice?
I'll have to take that on notice, Senator.
Are you also able to provide on notice to the committee a copy of all of the advice and recommendations you've received from your PR and strategy team and your government relation teams in relation to today's hearing?
Senator, I'm not sure I'd be able to do that because many of them were in conversations and brainstorming sessions, so it isn't in a crisis situation that's moving so fast. It's not as formal as tabling.
But to the extent that you've got talking points or other briefing notes or background documents, could you provide a copy of those to the committee?
I will certainly have a look as to whether there's anything like that, but I know, for example, when I did all my media, I did not have briefing documents. I was there to represent the company. And
sure. But just in relation, leading up to today's appearance by you, if you could provide all of that material. My last question relates to mobile roaming. Did you investigate mobile roaming as an option to provide connectivity to Optus's 10 million Australians. When I was the Shadow Minister for Communications, I passionately spoke about the importance of mobile roaming, particularly in rural, regional and remote areas. What steps did you take to investigate whether mobile roaming was an option for your customers?
Thanks for the question, Senator. As I mentioned in our first crisis meeting, we did raise the possibility, we did ask whether that was a possibility, and we understand that that's not technically feasible at the moment. So for that to occur, there are a range of technical things that would need to happen between the different providers, and that is not currently in place.
Well, mobile roaming is used, in fact, at the moment in relation to emergency phone calls, where there's only one Optus tower or one Telstra tower in a rural area. So you currently have that technology. So can you just explain why that wasn't explored?
Can you explain, Lambert? Yeah.
Yeah, so as Kelly has said, we don't have a mobile roaming agreement with Telstra or TPG. TPG roams on our network in regional areas on 3G. However, we don't have a facility for our subscribers to roam on another network.
Did you investigate the possibility of putting that in place on an emergency basis with the likes of Telstra?
It is not possible unless you have all the technical configuration set up, interconnectivity.
Is this something that you will now investigate, given you've told us you don't ever want to see this happen again?
Chair, that's something that we will need to discuss with the other mobile providers.
Is this something you will discuss?
Chair, it's something we will discuss with the others, but I also want to just mention that there are some practical implications of that, because
how about practically delivering the service to your customers that the customers need?
For example, in this instance, if we had automatically roamed our entire customer base onto another network, that could have overwhelmed and congested and brought down that network if it hadn't adequately planned for that.
So in other words, it is technically possible, but
it was not technically possible, but in the
not at the time, but it is. Yeah, that's right. It is technically feasible.
Yeah,
what I'm saying is it would require a lot of planning, coordination and work to be implemented on a practical basis.
Are you prepared to put that work in and those plans into place to guard against another possible outage, so that Australians will not lose their connectivity and suffer as much as they have?
What I can say, Senator, is we will definitely take away the suggestion and work through it with the other providers.
I must say, I'm flabbergasted. We asked you previously, what will you do to make sure this doesn't happen again? And this wasn't even one of the options you listed. Is it because you don't want your customers being able to roam on a competitor's network? Is this about protecting your own profits ahead of the interests of the customer? I don't understand why this wouldn't already be on your list of things to investigate. So I think Senator Henderson is absolutely correct.
So, Senator, two things. Firstly, we don't see profits and customers as opposed in any way. We only make a profit if we have happy customers, and more customers choose us and more customers choose to stay with us. So for us to be profitable, we want to do the right thing for customers. And secondly, if I were to say it another way, given that Optus has networks that are set up and we at the moment have about 30% market share, let's say hypothetically that there was a fault on Telstra's network where they have 50% market share, and suddenly all of those subscribers were to be on our network, we would have to have already invested in the capacity to be able to cater for that many customers simultaneously. So there are a lot of considerations if we go down this path about investment, capacity, and how that all works to make sure that you don't inadvertently, if one goes down, bring down another network by overwhelming it with scale.
I suggest you get on with talking to your competitors and making sure the Australian people are actually looked after and can access a service that is essential. We are going to have to wind up. I know Senator Pocock has a last burning question, and so does Senator Cadell. Can we keep them short?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks again for your time. One of my team members just called the Optus business line to inquire about compensation, and they were told that they couldn't lodge a claim and Optus would get back to them at some stage when they had more information. Which is what's going on there? You said earlier that you have had small business lodge complaints. What do I tell to small businesses?
Senator, if you could pass me the details of who called, and I'll look into why the process was not followed.
Well, that was literally half an hour ago, and they said you can't lodge a claim. We don't have the information about what's going to happen, and so we'll get back to you at some point once we have more information. Why don't they have the information?
I would have to look into that. So if you can pass me more details, I'll make sure we do.
Does your Optus business line have the information necessarily to take claims when people call up?
I believe that they do, and as I mentioned, we've already had a number of customers who have been able to do that. So I'll look into it.
Senator Pocock, we will have to wind. Senator Cadell, quickly.
Very quickly, you answered about the engagement levels of your staff when I asked that. Since then, I've been emailed by a number of your staff. One of them says, I just note that engagement surveys we did in the last couple of years had nothing about attitude or outsourcing and in keeping intellectual property in-house. They're pretty much about Optus values. There's some things about staff development, nothing about workload, how skilled the people you are. So in telling about high engagement, the score is very much delivering you. Given you didn't know the weakness in the network, given you haven't responded to the customers well, given you haven't reflected your staff's attitude, isn't it time for new leadership at Optus?
Well, thank you, Senator. I will take that on board.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to have to end today's hearing. I do thank you both for making yourselves available today at such short notice. I know this only happened a week ago, but it was important to make sure that the Australian people and the millions impacted were able to see and hear directly from you what is going on and what you're going to do about it. That concludes today's proceedings. We obviously will be continuing our inquiries with other stakeholders. There's questions we've asked you on notice, and we look forward to receiving them. We've set down Friday the 24th of November as the response date for those questions. Thank you both. Thanks to the Secretariat and to Hansard and my fellow senators on the committee. We close. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you.